Traveler, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to Wyrmspan.
3 centimeters! Wow.
What? Oh, it's Wyrmspan, actually? Well, in that case, welcome to Wyrmspan.
That's right, it's Wyrmspan, but not Wyrmspan, because this isn't about worms in the ground, but worms with wings, and wings was already taken. And for me, it's also always been Wyrmspan, as in, why is this game out there when a perfectly good game named Wingspan already exists? Span. And that is exactly the query we are going to be answering right now, along with other pressing questions such as, how is Wyrmspan different from Wingspan? What do the eggs really mean? Should you own both Wyrmspan and Wingspan? Does Wyrmspan fix Wingspan? Does Wingspan need fixing? Let's find out! Wingspan has been around for 5 years now, which is crazy, and has sold as many copies as there are known species of bird in the world times 10. So I'm gonna assume that you have played it at least once and that you have a passing familiarity with its mechanics. The basic rules of Wingspan are copied and pasted directly into Wyrmspan. So I'm gonna jump over the basic rules explanation and straight into what makes Wyrmspan different from its feathered counterpart. And I'm going to cut right now. Caves. In Wingspan, you've got birds and you're building a sanctuary for them. And birds, as it turns out, are pretty low maintenance. You just kind of put them in a lake and they take care of the rest. They build a nest and have a jolly old time. Well, in Wyrmspan, you've got dragons, and dragons, as it turns out, aren't generally about that nesting lifestyle. Instead, they want caves. Big, smelly, dripping caverns decorated with just the right amount of mold where they'll be able to store their treasure hoards. If you want to entice a dragon to live on your sanctuary, you'll need to first grab a stick of dynamite and your trusty pickaxe and exert your best Minecraft skills on a local mountainside. The game understands that this extra step before putting a card on your board can be a little tedious, so it tries to make it as fun as possible. Every time you add a cavern to your board, it will reward you with something. It might be a payout of cash, some extra resources, or maybe a bit of street cred with your local dragon guild. Once you have excavated a cavern, you'll be able to entice a dragon to come and roost in it. And that's exactly like playing a card to your board in Wingspan. You'll pay a number of resources printed on the dragon you're trying to play. You'll then add the dragon to a space on your board that has a cavern on it. And from then on, you will have access to that dragon's abilities. Now, every dragon in Wyrmspan will have an ability, just like birds in Wingspan. But to activate those abilities, you'll need to do something completely different from Wingspan. You'll need to take a special action that only exists in Wyrmspan, and that action is called exploring. So, you've got a cave system, and what's the point of having a cave system if you can't walk around in it every once in a while to, smell the damp and feel the crystals? When you explore, you'll have yourself a little wander down one of the 3 paths you've got on your board. And on the way, you'll extract all kinds of things from the dragons you run into, as if you were a landlord collecting rent money as you stroll down the corridor of an apartment complex. In Wingspan, you trigger relevant bird card abilities every time you take an action. In Wyrmspan, you'll only trigger your dragon abilities if you take a specific action, and that action is exploring. This is a rather profound change that makes Wyrmspan feel substantially different from Wingspan, but I'll touch more on that later. For now, we've got to talk about the guild. In Wyrmspan, there's a team of experts watching everything you do, and if you please them, they'll give you special rewards. You can earn favor with the guild just by doing stuff, as long as it's the right stuff. Inviting the right dragons into your sanctuary, digging the right kinds of caves, visiting those dragons periodically. Every time you see a brown shield, you'll move your guild emblem around this lovely wheel of prizes. Yay, the guild loves you. Have a meat, have a gold bar, have an egg. More exciting still, there are several different guilds, and you'll be choosing the one you play with randomly at the start of every game, and it'll add a thematic twist to everything, a thematic layer to your whole experience. It'll trickle theme throughout the entire game like lead in the water of ancient Rome, and you'll be like, finally, this is a version of Wingspan that actually connects with its theme. And we'll return to that in just a bit. For now, let's discuss the cumulative effect these changes have on Wingspan's design. And I say Wingspan's design because really, that's what is making Wyrmspan tick. Essentially, Wyrmspan makes the Wingspan experience feel more linear. Wingspan has always been a game of competing interests. The Wingspan design puts players in a bind where they need 3 things: cards, eggs, and birds, and they need them now at the same time, and their ability to get one depends on their ability to generate the other 2. And solving that problem is the experience. It's like, here's a problem that you'll never fully solve, but try to solve it as efficiently as you can with the cards you've been given, and you'll be rewarded. Wyrmspan, comparatively, is much more direct about the ways in which you can succeed. It says, build a cave, then put a dragon in that cave, then activate that dragon's ability to get more resources to build another cave. Repeat that, and you'll be rewarded. You'll do well. As a result, Wyrmspan for me was easier to grasp. I did better in my first game of Wyrmspan than I did in my first game of Wingspan. I felt like I could grapple with what was happening. And now, after repeated plays, I feel like I can play Wyrmspan more competitively than I can play Wingspan. That isn't to say that Wyrmspan is necessarily simpler. As far as rules complexity goes, it's about as complex as Wingspan. Rather, the process by which a player might succeed seems clearer, at least to me, in Wyrmspan than it is in Wingspan. I wouldn't say that that necessarily fixes Wingspan either. Wingspan is a bit stodgy, sure, but it's a good game and it doesn't really need fixing. Does it? Okay, Wingspan is really cool, don't get me wrong, but Wyrmspan adds some changes that I really like, in addition to the features I've already mentioned. There are no more personal objectives, for one thing. Instead, there's a group objective that changes every round. And yes, the text on the objective tiles is illegible at distances greater than 3 feet, or 2 if you're like me and blind as a bat. And yeah, the tiles are set so far away that everyone will probably forget about them until it's time to score them. But if 2 or more people tie for the same place, they each get to take home the full amount of points for that place. So that's pretty cool. I also happen to really like the guilds. Moving around the guild track, scoring rewards, and racing other players to kind of beat them to other rewards is really fun and a nice kind of opportunity for strategy. Though it is true that having a different guild in play doesn't make a tremendous amount of difference in gameplay. A game with the Plains Guild will feel pretty much the same as a game with the Seafarers Guild, for example. The rewards will just look a little bit different. And yes, it feels like there was a missed opportunity for theme there, but it's okay. I really like the guilds. They're fun to play with. Best of all, you get to start the game with 3 resources of your choice. You can just have them. You don't need to discard any cards. They're just yours. These changes have kept me reaching for Wyrmspan over Wingspan over the last couple weeks. However, there were some changes that were not made in this game, and thus I have some gripes about Wyrmspan that carried over from Wingspan, which I shall gripe about presently. Join me in the gripe cave. I managed to evict the gripe dragon, so now we've got the place to ourselves. Grr, let's gripe together. I'm griping, and I'm griping about the fact that Wyrmspan, just like Wingspan, insists on keeping your score and other players' scores a Da Vinci Code level secret until the end of the game. Since everyone's scores are scattered between tucked cards and cached resources and eggs and the little points printed on dragon cards and the objectives that they're scoring at the end of every round, there is no way to know how well you're doing or how well they're doing until everyone's scores are totaled up at the very end of the game when it's too late to do anything to change your position. It can be very disappointing to spend your entire game feeling like you're doing really well, only to come out 2 points short of attaining victory. 2 points that you could have easily made up had you been aware of your position during the game. Additionally, Wyrmspan inherits its predecessor's tempestuous relationship with theme, which can be summarized as heavily reliant on art. It's a good thing the art is beautiful to look at. I miss the field guide illustrations of Wingspan, but the watercolor on display here is amazing. I love it. But oh boy, was I hoping that they would clarify the eggs, and oh boy, was I disappointed. Eggs in Wingspan are a fluid concept. A bird will lay them, and a bird can fit a certain number of them into its nest. And at that point, eggs in real life and eggs in Wingspan part ways. Eggs in Wingspan are completely fungible. If you need a vulture, you can crack open a chickadee egg and you'll find a little vulture in there. Why? It's one of nature's great mysteries, I guess. Since Wyrmspan is a sort of next iteration of Wingspan, I was foolishly hoping that they would offer some thematic consistency to the eggs. And yeah, they definitely didn't do that. I don't think they were remotely interested in doing that. The eggs in Wyrmspan are another form of currency and nothing else. You spend them to do things, mostly to explore your caves additional times, which is puzzling and a bit concerning. Are you like stepping on those eggs every time you walk through the caves? But the strangest change to the egg situation is the cold storage for eggs. You've got 2 eggs that you can just keep. They don't belong to any dragons. They're not in any nests. I'm assuming you just kind of have them in a freezer in your office, like you're running some sort of demented IVF clinic for dragons. And that's weird. Wyrmspan could have brought egg clarity, and instead it only brought egg confusion. And I'm disappointed. As far as whether you need to own both Wingspan and Wyrmspan, well, my conviction is you don't need both. All of the Wingspan fans I have talked to have said that Wyrmspan is different enough to where they'd really like to keep both. And that's great. If you're a collector, you'll probably want to buy both of these. If you own Wingspan and you're wondering about Wyrmspan, I'd recommend picking up a copy, playing it, and then not being afraid to sell off the game, whichever one it happens to be, that you don't like as much as the other. If you don't own either of these games and you're wondering which one you should buy, I would recommend going with Wyrmspan. It's a little more expensive, but it brings a smoother experience right out of the box. You don't have to worry about keeping track of a personal objective in addition to a round objective. You don't have to worry about food dice. I didn't mention that, but you don't have to worry about food dice. It's great. This is a situation though where you can't go wrong. Both games are good. Try the one with the theme that you like more and go with that. But if both themes are equal for you, I'd go for Wyrmspan. So, Wyrmspan is pretty good. If you like dragons and fantasy lands, gets y'all excited, first ask yourself, do I need a game that prioritizes story over math? And if the answer to that question for you is a firm no or an unsure, well, pick up Wyrmspan and see what you think. If it is a heartfelt yes, maybe try something else. And that is our review of Wyrmspan. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, be sure to subscribe. Also, if you disagree with me, if you think people should go in on Wingspan before they get into Wyrmspan, drop that into the comments section. I would love to hear your opinions on the matter, and I'm sure everybody else checking out the video would love to hear more perspectives on that question as well. And with that, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.